So I will be reading from my first published story, Galina. As Vanessa said, it will be republished in a new anthology this summer, so it's been duly polished, which is a very good thing. So 3 things to remember as I read the excerpt. It is an excerpt, so I couldn't read the entire short story, and so I have to give you a little bit of a heads up in terms of storyline. The main character, Galina, has returned from Nigeria, to Ukraine from Nigeria, where her marriage to Umaru, that's the name of her ex-husband, has ended. She visits her mother in an exclusion zone, which is an area, a guarded area deemed uninhabitable due to a nuclear blast. And her mother is actually living there semi-legally. Finally, the name Olexa will come up a few times. He is Galina's new love interest. So here is the excerpt. I killed a swallow with my car. That was the first thing Galina said when she got to her mother's house. But you are here, my dearest daughter. That is all that matters to me. Her mother threw open her arms and kissed her tightly. Besides, we can drink some of that bad omen away, she continued, winking in the direction of a small shed. You've been making vodka? Galina asked. Well, how else do you expect me to make a little money or return a favor? Uncle Ivan came by yesterday to help me harvest some wheat. He took home a jar of my vodka. Let's go inside, her mother said, and she led the way, walking slowly towards the kitchen by an orchard of pear and apple trees overburdened with ripening fruit. After the lunch of borscht her mother prepared, Galina returned to Drabov, where she had rented a small, barely furnished one-bedroom apartment. As soon as she unlocked the door, she ran the bath, and then she flung off her clothes, shoving them into a plastic bag. Later in the evening, she would do what she always did when she returned from her visits to her mother in the exclusion zone. She would soak the clothes in her hot water overnight and then wash them by hand. She was walking around her apartment in just her underwear when the phone rang. Hello? Hello? She immediately knew who the shouting voice was. It was Umaru calling from Nigeria. She pictured his face, always open and inviting, and the way he often furrowed his brow when he spoke, his tall body attractive and lean, and she fought the impulse to hang up. Yes, her English sounded foreign to her ears. Galina, Galina, can you hear me? What do you want? How did you find me? I'm calling to say She gave into the impulse and hung up. By the time she reached the bathroom and opened the door, the phone rang again. Galina stepped into the narrow room and shut the door behind her, her back in knots, her arms heavy, and her hands in fists. She caught her reflection in the small mirror above the dripping sink, and she felt a whoosh of air leave her thin lips. The face that stared back at her was as pale as the moon, and because her pupils were dilated in her large eyes, she thought again how she resembled a bird. She unclenched her fists and touched her chin where sunspots had emerged, reminding her of those sunny days in Nigeria when she changed into her bikini, thrown a towel on the grass outside their house, and taken in the hot rays of the equatorial sun. One such day, she felt a nudge on her right shoulder and found a Nigerian neighbor standing over her. Madame, Madame, are you okay? She removed her sunglasses and laughed out loud. Yes, of course, I'm just sunbathing. He had nodded and walked away quickly, as if embarrassed. In the bathroom, Galina laughed to herself, a contrived laugh, at once girlish and manic. If she was losing her mind, this might be one of the symptoms. The phone rang again. Galina undressed fully and slipped into the bath, sinking into its warmth, deeper and deeper, until more than half her head was submerged, and she couldn't hear the ringing of the phone until all was silent like in a dream. 1 week later, Galina drove back to the exclusion zone. She was to visit her mother. She was leaving a trail of voice messages from Olexa behind her. The first one in his calm, deep, unaffected voice, "Where are you?" The second one, "Are you around?" The third and fourth one, again, "Where are you?" Her mind had begun to repress everything and anything that reminded her of the past, especially those moments that occurred in sequence: 1, 2, 3, 4, the number of times she had miscarried her babies, the number of times she'd failed to give Umaru a son or a daughter, the number of times Umaru's mother had arrived from her village near Kano only to say, not yet, not even one, how come? What was the word her Nigerian doctor had used to describe her condition? Yes, barren. She was a barren woman. In her car, Galina followed a winding, tarred road through a land so fertile it was hard to believe. Nature had taken over, giving rise to a dense tangle of trees and vegetation in areas where people had once lived, and allowing for a surge in the population of animals. The last time she traveled this road, she had spotted a wild boar moving swiftly by the edge of the forest. She slowed down at the checkpoint and smiled warmly at the guards. Reaching into a handbag, she pulled out 2 packets of cigarettes. "Here," she offered them to one of the guards. "Well, thank you," he said. The other one cleared his throat. "We've been informed that an old woman died a few hours ago in one of the villages. We won't know who until she's been identified, but we're following orders and telling folks who are coming through now." The image of the dead swallow filled Galina's mind. "My mother? We don't know, you hear." She nodded, her head bobbing as if detached, and drove off, raising radioactive dust in her wake. Galina came upon field after passing Shramkovka, each one a reminder of how much distance she had to cover to get to her mother's house. Visions came, more birds, not swallows but vultures this time, with dusty light brown feathers and balding heads that were too small for their bodies. In the fields behind their house in Nigeria, the vultures had landed often, hovering excitedly over some poor dead thing. "Enough," she said aloud to herself. She pressed her right foot down on the accelerator, lurching forward over the forsaken and fertile land. When she got to her mother's house, the ducklings her mother kept were in a delirious state. They had not been fed. They followed her, staying close to her heels, quacking mercilessly. Her mother was not there, not in the kitchen, not in the main house, where an old radio played a merry folk song. Galina had been planning to tell her mother why she returned to the country. In time, she would tell her Umaru's secret. He had taken another wife in his village and impregnated her. Galina returned to the kitchen and observed the beginnings of a pot of borscht that her mother had started. Half a head of cabbage, shredded carrots and beets, a handful of dill hastily harvested, large beans in a white metal cup, and no potatoes. If she hadn't taken her favorite path and wandered as she had done as a child, through the orchard where a carpet of rotten apples and pears crunched beneath her feet, over the sturdy mound of the underground cellar emerging out of the ground like a grave, she probably would never have heard her mother's voice, muffled and distant, coming from the open rusted pipe above the mound. "Galina!" And that was how she found her mother, not dead, but 6 feet underground in the cellar, where she had gone to get potatoes for borscht and fallen, twisting her ankle. After 3 days, when the swelling in her ankle had gone down, Galina's mother ordered Galina back to work. "Go, I will be fine. Besides, you promised to come visit again this weekend." Her mother was perched comfortably on a divan by a window that overlooked a walnut tree, its branches hanging low with green fruit. Since she had found her mother in the cellar, something in Galina's being had shifted, and a feeling of euphoria had crept in. She flitted around the house, her arms light and reaching for the rugs on the floor that needed dusting, for the empty water bucket, for the knob on the old television. for a bowl of borscht that she placed by her mother's bed, for apples in the orchard that she also placed by her mother's bed, and finally for her mother's face, which she held close to her own and kissed goodbye. She got into her car and drove towards home, and as soon as she passed the guards at the checkpoint, she remembered a childhood song. It was short and sweet, and the words rolled off her tongue like soft clouds. The first line, sung underneath gray skies, "May there always be blue skies." On either side of her, large evergreens grew thick inside a darkening forest. The second line, "May there always be sunshine." The sun hid behind clouds. The third line, "May there always be mother." Galina's eyes filled with tears, and she found herself laughing into the fourth line, "May there always be me." The end to an odd sequence, to a song she had learned in Soviet youth camp. She repeated the words, and again her tears and laughter occurred together. The city of Drabov also lay underneath gray skies. In front of her apartment building, Galina parked her car by a small playground filled with children wearing colorful clothes. With a quick wave, she greeted the old women sitting on the wooden bench by a sandbox, and then she walked into the dim, musty hallway of the building. Because she felt lucky and happy that day, she took the old elevator, which banged shut and rattled loudly as it journeyed to the fourth floor. She had just emerged from the elevator and was unlocking her door when she heard the phone ringing. Like a bird, she alighted towards the phone and picked up the receiver, and without much of a pause said, "I'm here," for she was sure it was Alexa. But the voice on the phone was not Alexa's. It was Uncle Ivan's. "I'm so sorry, Galitchka." Galina's arms grew heavy. She cleared her throat, but her lips emitted no sound. "I just found your mother on the divan. She's dead." All Galina heard through an open window in the kitchen were the peals of laughter coming from the playground outside. Thank you.